My daughter's heartbreaking post about her absent billionaire father shocked the entire internet. It started quietly, just another late evening on social platforms where people shared photos, jokes, and thoughts that would usually sink into the endless digital noise. But one post refused to disappear. A single photograph of a 17-year-old girl sitting on her porch steps, clutching an old stuffed elephant, her eyes swollen from crying. Below it, the caption, "To the father who chose success over me, I hope you see what you missed. I'm not angry. I just wish you had tried." 7 simple sentences, and a tag that no one expected. Cassian Rowe official. The billionaire visionary the world admired, quoted, and idolized. Within minutes, comments multiplied like wildfire. Some people were furious. How do you abandon your own child? Money doesn't make you a man. Others were overwhelmed with sympathy. This broke my heart. No child should have to feel forgotten. Journalists reposted it. Influencers made reaction videos. Strangers wrote essays beneath her photo, pouring out their own stories of abandonment and longing. What began as a deeply personal confession from a hurting teenager became a global conversation that pushed one question to the center of millions of screens. How could a man who built an empire fail the one person who should have mattered most? The world wanted answers. The world wanted the truth, and without meaning to, Celeste had forced it into the light. Before the world formed its opinions, before the headlines, before the arguments in the comments, there was something deeper hiding beneath Celeste's words. Something many people recognized the moment they read her post, a familiar ache. So let me ask you, right here, right now, have you ever wished someone you loved would simply show up? Not with gifts, not with excuses, just their presence, their effort, their willingness to care. Or this, questions about the people who should have been there, but weren't. The mystery only grew as people dug through old interviews, photos, and public records, searching for any sign of the father he claimed to be, yet never was to her. It became clear this story wasn't just about wealth or neglect. It was about choices, the kind that define a person far more than a public image ever could. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because Celeste's post didn't just expose a wound. You might think you already understand this situation. A hurting daughter. A mother caught in the middle. But what followed surprised everyone. How did the father react when he finally saw the message? What truths had the mother carried alone? Truths she never shared with Celeste or anyone else. And how could one heartfelt post from a teenager set off a chain of events powerful enough to reconnect a family that had been separated for almost a decade? More complexity, more moments that would change each of their lives forever. This story isn't just about pain, it's about what comes after it. Before we step deeper into this journey, I want to ask you, if stories about family, healing, and second chances speak to you, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you believe about forgiveness. Tell me what family means to you. Your voice matters here, and your opinions help shape this community. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of this emotional story. The cafe was unusually quiet that morning. The kind of quiet that usually comforted Maribel. She loved slow dawn hours, before the town woke up, before life demanded anything of her, before memories had time to stir. But today, nothing felt calm. She sat tucked into the corner booth, the same booth she had claimed for nearly a decade. It faced the window, giving her a perfect view of Main Street, where cars rarely hurried and neighbors waved at each other without thinking. Normally, she would enjoy that. Normally, she would let the simple charm of her town soften her thoughts. Her phone buzzed non-stop on the table, rattling against the wood like it was trying to escape. Messages, mentions, notifications stacking in endless waves. Every few seconds, another vibration, another alert, another reminder that something had slipped out of her control. Maribel swallowed hard. She tapped the screen again, knowing exactly what she would find there, but unable to stop herself. There it was, her daughter's post. The photo, the caption, the tag, everything. Celeste, sitting on the porch steps last night with her knees drawn to her chest, clutching that worn, stuffed elephant like it was the only anchor she had left. Tears streaked her face. Not angry tears, quiet ones, the kind that come from deep inside a hurt too old to hide. Maribel blinked quickly, her throat tightening. She had memorized the image hours ago, but it still hit her like fresh news every time she saw it. The caption read like a wound that had finally opened. To the father who chose success over me, I hope you see what you missed. I'm not angry. I just wish you had tried. The words were fragile, honest, brave, and unbearable. She pressed her fingertips to her temple as if she could push away the sudden ache building behind her eyes. Celeste had always been expressive, creative, poetic, thoughtful. But Maribel never imagined she would broadcast something so personal to the entire world. She reloaded the post again. The numbers were climbing faster than she could process. Hundreds of thousands of likes, a flood of comments from strangers who didn't know her daughter, didn't know her family, didn't know a thing about the storm she had spent years trying to shield Celeste from. Maribel's heart twisted. Fear, panic, guilt, heartbreak, all of it swirled inside her like a storm she couldn't outrun. She felt guilty most of all. She had tried to give Celeste the best life she could. Love, stability, honesty. But she knew, deep down, there were pieces of the past she never talked about. Moments she kept locked away because she didn't want to reopen old wounds. She had wanted her daughter to grow without bitterness, without feeling abandoned. And she was staring at it now. The bell over the cafe door jingled lightly. A couple came in, whispering urgently to each other with their phones in hand. Maribel lowered her head, hoping they wouldn't notice her, but she could feel questions surfacing in the air around town. This was a community where news moved fast, sometimes too fast, and the mention of a billionaire's name had already stirred the pot. She heard the barista mutter, "Did you see that post from the Arden girl?" Another customer responded quietly, "I can't imagine how she must feel." Maribel's chest tightened, not because people were talking, but because they were right. She knew exactly how her daughter felt. Celeste had spent her whole life pretending the absence didn't hurt. Pretending birthdays without him didn't matter. Pretending the photos of Cassian on magazine covers didn't sting. Maribel wished she could have taken every bit of that pain for her. She had tried, in her own way. She made sure Celeste never went to bed feeling unloved. She made sure the house was filled with warmth, even when the world outside felt cold. She made sure to answer every question honestly, except the ones that would hurt too much. But now, watching the world sink its teeth into her daughter's vulnerability, she wondered if she had made mistakes without noticing. Another burst of notifications rolled across her screen. She deserved better. How does a man with everything ignore his own child? This hits too close to home. Each one cut her open a little more. She wasn't angry at Celeste. No. She was proud of her courage, proud that she had finally spoken her truth. But Maribel also felt a pang of dread. The internet had a way of lifting people up one minute and tearing them down the next. The deeper the story went, the more opinions would surface. And she wasn't worried about herself. She was worried about her daughter. Celeste was sensitive, bright, artistic, strong, yes, but still young, still growing, still learning to navigate the world, especially one that suddenly felt enormous and unkind. Maribel exhaled shakily and wrapped her hands around the warm coffee mug in front of her. She hadn't taken a single sip since she sat down, but the warmth grounded her, reminded her to breathe. She needed a plan. She needed to talk to Celeste. She needed to be the steady presence her daughter could lean on. Before the headlines, before the heartbreak, before life pulled them in opposite directions, there was a summer neither Maribel nor Cassian ever forgot. A season that felt simple, unexpected, and strangely perfect in its own quiet way. Maribel had grown up in a town where everyone knew everyone, where people took time to say hello, where neighbors remembered each other's birthdays without setting reminders. Her childhood was filled with borrowed books, homemade dinners, and evenings spent watching the moon settle above the treetops. She was used to warmth. She was used to sincerity. She was used to the kind of life that didn't need to impress anyone. But she had dreams bigger than her zip code, not dreams of fame or glamour, dreams of writing stories that touched hearts, of giving life to characters who felt real, of sharing emotions with readers she would never meet. She applied to a small creative writing program in the city, hoping it would open doors she had never dared to knock on before. When she was accepted, she packed her bags, hugged her family goodbye, and promised herself she would make the most of those 8 weeks. She paid for the program with saved tips from waitressing, and took a job at a rooftop restaurant to stay afloat while she learned. The city felt enormous compared to her hometown. Bright lights, endless sounds, people who didn't bother to look up unless they needed to. But she loved it anyway. She loved the energy. She loved the possibility. She loved the stories breathing in every corner of the streets. She had no idea her life was about to change. One late afternoon, a sudden burst of rain swept across the skyline. The restaurant staff scrambled to bring guests inside, folding umbrellas, drying chairs, and apologizing for the weather. Maribel moved quickly, her hair damp, her apron slightly askew, but her smile still calm. Just as she wiped down a table near the entrance, the door burst open. A man in a soaked suit stood there, clearly irritated, water dripping from the sleeves of his tailored jacket. His tie was loose, his hair plastered to his forehead, and frustration radiated from him like heat. He looked like someone who wasn't used to losing control of even the smallest detail. This was Cassian Rowe, though she didn't know his name yet, and even if she had, she wouldn't have recognized it. Back then, he wasn't the billionaire everyone knew today. He was just a young entrepreneur trying to build something bigger than himself. He stepped inside, exhaling sharply, then glanced around the restaurant as if searching for a reason not to collapse under the weight of the day. Maribel approached with a towel. "You look like the rain won that battle," she said gently. He blinked at her, surprised, maybe even caught off guard by the kindness in her tone. Most people treated him with a mix of caution and expectation. Her voice didn't carry either. He accepted the towel with a slight nod. "Today hasn't exactly been cooperative." "Well," she smiled, "you're inside now. That counts for something, For the first time that day, he felt his shoulders relax. She led him to a table near the heater, brought him a warm drink, and offered suggestions from the menu. He listened, not because he needed help choosing, but because her presence felt unexpectedly calming. "You've had a long day," she said softly. "You have no idea. Want to talk about it?" He hesitated. People usually wanted something when they asked him that. They wanted access, favors, connections, something. But she waited without expectation, her eyes steady, patient. "It's just work," he finally said. "Meetings, deadlines. People who demand more than I can give. That sounds exhausting." "It is, and lonely." He looked at her then, not because she said something profound, but because she understood without needing him to explain. "How did you guess?" he asked quietly. "Because tired people look a certain way," she replied, "and so do lonely ones." Something inside him loosened. They talked. About his company, about her writing, about how different their backgrounds were. And somehow, despite the distance between their worlds, they found common ground. He was used to sharp minds, ambition, intensity, but Maribel brought him peace. She listened without judgment, laughed at the right moments, and spoke with sincerity he rarely encountered. Before he realized it, the restaurant was closing. "Sorry," she said with a gentle laugh. "I didn't mean to keep you." "You didn't," he said. "I stayed because I wanted to." He returned the next day, and the day after that, and again until the staff began quietly whispering about the handsome man who always asked for the same server. Maribel tried not to read into it. She was in the city for a short time. He clearly came from a completely different life, but the way he looked at her, the way he talked to her, the way he relaxed when she entered the room, made it hard to ignore the growing pull between them. Their conversations stretched past closing time. Their walks after her shift grew longer. Their laughter became more familiar. One evening, after sharing dessert on her tiny apartment balcony, he leaned forward, resting his forehead lightly against hers. She felt her breath catch, not because the words were flattering, but because she knew he meant them. He wasn't a cold, unfeeling businessman back then. He was a man lugging around pressure he never talked about, a man who sacrificed sleep for goals, a man who had forgotten how to rest until she reminded him. They fell in love quietly, without flashy gestures, without showy dates. Just a series of small, honest moments that built something real. They teased each other about their opposite backgrounds. He introduced her to his world of innovation. She introduced him to joy found in simple things: breakfast pastries, hand-me-down books, late-night stories that made them both laugh. For 2 years they built something meaningful, something fragile, something beautiful. But even then, shadows lingered. Cassian's rising success came with growing responsibility. Investors, deadlines, pressure that crept into every spare corner of his mind. He loved her, but he also feared losing momentum. Still, back then, he always found his way back to her. Maribel remembered the night they watched the city lights from the bridge near her apartment. His arm was wrapped around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest as the water reflected shimmers of gold and white below them. "If the world ever gets too heavy," she whispered, "just come here." He kissed the top of her head. "This is the only place I feel free. But freedom doesn't last when the world demands more than you can give." And neither of them knew that the beautiful moments they cherished were the last stretch of calm before life swept them apart. In her memories, those early days remained untouched, warm, hopeful, full of promise. But memories alone couldn't hold a family together, and the decisions that came after would change everything. But as she stared down at the viral post again, another thought crept into her mind, one she had spent years avoiding. What will he do when he sees this? She didn't say his name, not even in her thoughts. She didn't have to. Cassian's face had been all over the news for years. Business conferences, interviews, award ceremonies. The world admired him. The world trusted him. The world believed he had built something extraordinary. But Maribel knew a version of him the public never saw. A version marked by fear, pressure, and choices he didn't know how to handle. But now, Celeste had unknowingly opened a door none of them could close, and the world was waiting for whatever would come through it. Those early years of warmth and intimacy eventually collided with a reality neither Maribel nor Cassian could escape. What began as a promising future for him slowly morphed into a demanding force that altered everything they had built together. Cassian had always been ambitious. That was part of what drew Maribel to him. His mind worked like a machine, always planning, always analyzing, always reaching for something beyond what he already had. But as Row Innovations approached its biggest breakthrough, ambition shifted from passion to necessity. Partnerships required constant travel. Teams relied heavily on him, sometimes too heavily. What used to be late-night strolls with Maribel turned into late-night conference calls. His time no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the empire he was building. He loved Maribel deeply. But every day he felt pulled in two directions, toward the woman who brought him peace, and toward the future he had spent years chasing. He didn't know how to balance both. He tried, in the beginning. He tried so hard. He would surprise Maribel with pastries after working non-stop for 2 days. He would leave notes in her notebook, short and sweet, apologizing for missed dinners. "I know," she would reply softly, trying to sound stronger than she felt. But as months passed, those tender pauses became rare. The gap widened. Their conversations shortened. He spent more time looking at screens than into her eyes. Maribel understood he was under pressure. She knew he wasn't pulling away out of lack of love. She knew he had responsibilities she couldn't fully comprehend. But understanding didn't soothe the quiet ache of watching the man she adored slip farther out of reach each day. Then came the news that changed her life. She suspected it early, long before she took the test. She felt the shift inside her body, a flutter of intuition that she couldn't explain. When she saw the result, she sat on the edge of her bed and pressed a hand against her stomach, breath shaking with a mix of joy and fear. This was something precious, something she had always hoped for someday, but not like this, not when their relationship teetered on a fragile edge. Still, she knew she had to tell him. She believed honesty mattered more than timing. There was noise in the background, hurried voices, footsteps echoing. He spoke quickly, his tone strained. "Maribel, I'm in a meeting. Can I call you back? I have something important to say," she insisted. "I'll call you in an hour, I promise." He meant it. She heard the sincerity, even through the stress. But the call never came. Days passed, then a week. His messages were short, rushed, half-formed thoughts that barely acknowledged her concerns. When he finally stood on her doorstep, his face told a story she didn't want to hear. He looked worn, defeated, pulled thin by responsibilities swallowing him whole. The brief flicker of relief at seeing her faded when she told him the news. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. His breath caught. The color drained from his face. For a long moment he didn't speak. He just stared at her, overwhelmed by a truth he wasn't prepared for. Maribel waited, hoping for joy, fear, even confusion, anything but the suffocating silence that followed. Maribel, I can't." His voice faltered. "My schedule, my commitments, everything is falling on me right now." "I'm not asking you to abandon your work," she replied gently. "I'm asking you to be here." He looked away, jaw tightening. Not out of anger, out of panic. Cassian could handle investors, teams, deadlines, crises, but the thought of becoming a father, that terrified him, in ways he couldn't articulate. He didn't abandon her intentionally. He didn't walk out the door with a plan to disappear. Fear of disappointing her. Fear of losing control of a life he had barely managed to keep afloat. Just two people trying to hold on to something that was slipping between their fingers. Maribel gave him space, hoping he would gather himself and come forward. She wanted to believe he would choose love over fear, but each day that passed without a call, without a visit, cast another shadow on her hope. She attended appointments alone. She kept working until her belly grew too heavy. She wrote short letters to Cassian she never sent, letters full of tenderness mixed with quiet disappointment. By the time she moved back to her hometown, she wasn't angry at him. But she wasn't willing to raise her child in a world of uncertainty. She left the city with a suitcase, her unborn daughter, and memories too bittersweet to revisit. When Celeste was born, Maribel sent a message to Cassian with a picture. He responded with congratulations, a promise to send financial support, and a request for time to figure things out. Months stretched into years. He visited in the beginning, once, then twice. But each visit ended with a subtle distance that grew wider. His work consumed him. His life moved faster than he could manage, and eventually the silence between them became the norm. The money arrived like clockwork, large payments that ensured Celeste never lacked anything material. But presence? That was something he never provided consistently. She never poisoned Celeste's heart with resentment. She simply told the truth, in the gentlest way possible. "Your father is working very hard. He does love you. He just doesn't know how to be here the way we wish he could." But even the softest truth can still hurt. Years passed. Milestones came and went. Birthdays blew out candles without him. Photos captured moments he never witnessed. And while Cassian built an empire, Maribel built a home. A warm, steady, loving home that held Celeste together, even when questions lingered in the corners of her smile. Maribel sometimes wondered if she made the right choice leaving quietly, without demanding he stay. But she also knew forcing someone to be present wasn't love. It was pressure. And pressure had already destroyed the man he used to be. She raised her daughter with strength and compassion, even as she carried the quiet ache of what could have been. And though she buried her own pain deep, she couldn't bury Celeste's. And one day, that feeling would spill into the world in a way none of them expected. Celeste Arden came into the world with her mother's gentle spirit and her father's fierce intensity. An unusual blend for a child, but somehow it fit her perfectly. She grew up with big eyes that memorized details, a mind that moved fast, and a heart that felt everything deeply. Anyone who met her sensed something special about her, even when she was little. She learned early how to smile through things she didn't fully understand. She learned how to behave like everything was fine, even when something inside her felt off balance. Most people admired her sweetness. They didn't realize sweetness often forms around something tender. Maribel did her best to fill every corner of Celeste's world with love. Her childhood was warm, home-cooked meals, bedtime stories, little weekend adventures, and the kind of mother who remembered every detail that mattered. Maribel made sure her daughter never felt alone. She taught her kindness first, confidence second, and resilience last, but only because resilience is something you learn once life demands it. And life began demanding it early. As Celeste grew older, curiosity grew with her. She knew she had a father. She had seen photos, heard small mentions, felt the weight of his absence before she ever understood what absence meant. Children sense patterns long before they learn to name them. She would ask now and then, her voice soft, "Mom, why doesn't he visit?" Maribel always answered gently, honest, but never cruel. "He's working a lot, sweetheart. He cares about you. His life just moves fast." Celeste accepted the explanation because she trusted her mother. But inside, a quiet ache began forming, a space she didn't know how to fill, a space shaped exactly like a man she barely remembered. Her earliest memory of him was faint, a tall figure, a warm hand, a stuffed elephant pressed into her tiny arms. She didn't remember his voice, just the way he smelled faintly of cologne and something metallic, something like city life. That memory became a treasure she held on to, without realizing how fragile it was. As the years passed, she watched her friends' fathers show up to events, performances, school activities. She didn't envy them, not consciously, but she paid attention. Her heart always tightened just a little when she saw dads cheering in the crowd, lifting their children onto their shoulders, clapping proudly with cameras in hand. She wished for those moments quietly, the way some children wish on stars, without expecting them to come true. Birthdays were the hardest. Her mother always made them wonderful, but even surrounded by warmth, there was always a tiny empty seat at the table that neither of them mentioned. Maribel tried to compensate in loving ways, but Celeste still felt it. She wasn't angry about it, though. Anger never found space in her heart. Instead, she carried longing, the kind that sits quietly in the background, waiting for someone to notice. When she reached her teenage years, the gap between what she felt and what she showed grew wider. She handled her emotions the way Maribel taught her, with grace, with patience, with empathy. But empathy sometimes hurts the person who carries it. Celeste became good at staying busy. Clubs, art projects, volunteering. The busyness distracted her from a truth she didn't want to face. She wanted her father to choose her. Not out of obligation. Not because he felt guilty, but because he wanted to be there. As she got older, she became more aware of who he was. It was impossible not to. His name appeared everywhere. Articles, interviews, online discussions. People praised him, quoted him, admired his work ethic. They called him brilliant. They called him visionary. Some even called him an inspiration. Celeste would watch clips of him speaking on panels, wearing tailored suits, discussing leadership and responsibility with calm authority. Responsibility. The word tasted bitter when she heard it from him. She would set her phone down, inhale slowly, and tell herself she was overthinking. He was busy. He was important. He had a lot on his shoulders. Maybe one day things would change. But they didn't, not even slightly. He missed school events. He missed honor roll ceremonies. He missed the day she won first place in the art contest. He missed the day she got her acceptance into an advanced program. He missed every moment that would have meant something if he had been there to applaud. Still, Celeste never complained. She smiled. She excelled. She kept going. Emotion found a home in her creative work instead. She picked up photography, capturing raw, honest moments most people overlooked. She wrote short pieces about feelings she couldn't say out loud. Her online following grew slowly, drawn to the sincerity in her posts. She wasn't chasing popularity. She was chasing expression, a way to release what stayed locked inside. Her 17th birthday approached quietly. Maribel planned something small but meaningful, a favorite cake, a few friends, a family dinner. Celeste enjoyed it all, but underneath the laughter, a small, persistent sadness lingered, one she hid well, even from her mother. She checked her phone once, then again, but nothing from him. Not a message, not a call, not even a short happy birthday. That night, long after everyone went to bed, Celeste sat on the porch steps alone, the same porch where she had taken countless photos, the same porch where she watched lightning bugs dance through summer evenings, the same porch where she once waited as a child, hoping maybe her father would surprise her. She held the stuffed elephant, the one gift he had ever given her himself. She squeezed it gently, letting tears fall, releasing emotions she had stored for years. She opened the camera app on her phone, took a picture of herself holding the elephant, stared at it for a long time, then she began to type. She didn't write with anger. The part of her that wanted him to see the daughter he barely knew. When she finished, she read the lines twice, trembling slightly. Her thumb hovered above the post button. For 1 second, she thought about deleting everything. For 1 second, she thought about pretending she didn't feel this deeply. But she pressed it anyway, not to punish anyone. She pressed it because silence had become too heavy to carry alone. She closed her phone, wiped her face, and whispered a small apology to the night, apologizing for feeling too much, for wanting too much, for finally speaking what she had tried so long to hide. She didn't know the world would see it. She didn't know millions would react. She didn't know her life and her family were about to shift in ways she couldn't imagine. All she knew was this: for the first time in her life, she had said the truth out loud. And the truth never stays quiet for long. Celeste went to sleep that night, unaware of the storm she had stirred. She had posted her truth, and then curled under her blanket, exhausted from crying, hopeful only for a little clarity in the morning. But the world had other plans. By sunrise, her phone was buzzing non-stop. By mid-morning, the internet was already deep in conversation. By noon, her post was everywhere. What started as a quiet confession from a hurting girl had turned into a global discussion about love, abandonment, and the cost of success. Her photos spread through timelines like electricity. People who had never heard of Celeste Arden were suddenly speaking her name with sympathy, curiosity, or outrage. The comments section turned into its own universe, an emotional mix of stories, support, criticism, and raw honesty. Some people wrote paragraphs describing their own absentee parents. Some offered comfort, telling her she deserved better. Others demanded answers from the man she had tagged. It didn't take long for the story to jump platforms. A popular blogger reposted it with the caption, "A billionaire can change the world but forget his own daughter." Then celebrities chimed in. Actors, musicians, influencers, people who had never met her but felt compelled to speak after reading her words. They talked about family. They talked about emotional neglect. They talked about the human cost of chasing success without balance. Two well-known public figures even shared videos in support of her, calling her post brave, important, and a wake-up call to parents everywhere. Journalists followed next. Some wrote short pieces summarizing the situation. Others dug deeper, searching for any public statements Cassian had ever made about family, love, or personal life. Articles popped up on trending pages, featuring headlines like, "Tech founder tagged by daughter in emotional post. Is success worth the loss of family?" People debated endlessly in comment threads. Some defended Cassian. He's a busy man. People don't know his situation. It's not fair to judge him without context. Others came to Celeste's side with fierce loyalty. She deserved a father who showed up. No child should feel invisible. This post broke me. And then there were those caught in between, sympathetic, conflicted, and trying to understand both sides. But the loudest voices were the ones who saw themselves in her. Thousands of individuals shared their own childhood stories, turning her comment section into a place of collective healing and pain. For every supportive message, there was another filled with anger at Cassian. Some wrote harsh criticisms. Some demanded accountability. The internet had a way of magnifying raw emotion, and once people chose a side, they defended it fiercely. While the world reacted, Celeste walked through her school hallways completely overwhelmed. She hadn't expected anything close to this. Her friends stared at her with wide eyes. Teachers whispered in corners. Notifications flooded her phone faster than she could clear them. Her stomach twisted every time she opened an app. She wasn't used to being seen this much. She wasn't used to strangers analyzing her life like it was a public story, rather than a deeply personal wound. Her mother's heart, meanwhile, felt heavier with each passing minute. Maribel watched the digital wildfire spread. She sat on the living room couch, scrolling through comments, trying to understand how a single post had turned into a worldwide discussion. She had known Celeste was hurting, but she never imagined the depth of that hurt would echo across millions of screens. She feared for her daughter, not because Celeste had done anything wrong, but because the internet didn't understand gentleness. It consumed everything, twisted things when it wanted to, exaggerated details until they became almost unrecognizable. Maribel wasn't just a mother. She was a protector by instinct. Seeing strangers comment on her daughter's emotional life made her chest tighten with worry. She wanted to shield her from the cruelty that often followed vulnerability online. She wanted to wrap Celeste in the same love she had always given her, the kind that felt like soft blankets and warm tea and whispered reassurances. But something else kept clawing at her thoughts. Or would the weight of what he had missed finally reach him in full? Maribel didn't dare predict it. She had known him at his most tender and at his most overwhelmed. She had seen what pressure did to him. She had seen how easily he disappeared when life became too loud. What she didn't know was that, at that very moment, Cassian Rowe was standing backstage at a major technology event, surrounded by journalists, innovators, and executives waiting for him to deliver a keynote speech. He had just finished shaking hands with a panel organizer when his assistant hurried toward him, holding a tablet with trembling fingers. "Cassian, you need to see this." He almost brushed it off. He had a schedule to follow, a speech to give, a reputation to maintain. But one glance at his assistant's pale expression made him pause. "What is it?" She swallowed hard. "It's about your daughter." His heart stumbled. He took the tablet, the tag, the tear-streaked face, the stuffed elephant. The silence of the moment, pressing in on him like a weight he wasn't prepared to carry. He read her words slowly, painfully, each line pulling him deeper into a truth he had been avoiding for years. He didn't feel embarrassment. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel irritation at the world watching him. He felt something far worse, regret. Deep, heavy regret that made his chest tighten. Memories he hadn't touched in a decade crashed into him all at once. Maribel's smile, tiny baby hands gripping his finger, the sound of a newborn cry, the promise he once wanted to keep, the fear he let win instead. He stepped away from the stage, ignoring the confused faces around him. He couldn't give a speech right now. He couldn't pretend he was fine. Not when the world had just forced him to confront the one thing he had spent years running from. For the first time in a very long time, Cassian didn't think about business or responsibility. He thought about family. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the years he missed, the moments he had let slip away, the child who grew without him. He left the venue with one thought echoing in his mind. I have to go to her. Across town, Maribel's hand trembled as she refreshed the post again. The world was watching. Her daughter was exposed. And someone else, someone whose absence shaped every part of this story, was finally watching too. Maribel remained at the cafe long after her coffee had gone cold. She wasn't even pretending to drink it anymore. She just held the cup because it kept her hands from shaking. Every few minutes, she would glance at the door as if expecting something, though she wasn't sure what. Her mind kept circling the same thoughts. How would Celeste handle the attention? How far would this story spread? How much more could a 17-year-old heart endure? But beneath those worries lived another one she tried to push away every time it surfaced. Would Cassian show up? She didn't know which possibility frightened her more, him returning or him staying away. Outside, cars rolled past. People walked their dogs. Morning life continued as usual. Yet Maribel felt like she was suspended in a moment that refused to move forward. Then a black sedan she hadn't seen in years slowed in front of the cafe. Her breath caught. No, it couldn't be, but it was. The car pulled into a space across the lot. The engine shut off. A long, heavy silence followed. The door opened. Cassian Rose stepped out. Not the polished figure the world admired, not the confident leader who commanded rooms with ease. This was a man stripped down to the truth, wearing simple clothes, hair slightly disheveled, eyes carrying the weight of choices he could no longer hide from. He looked around the lot, as if he was searching for courage, as if he wasn't sure he deserved to be seen, as if he wasn't sure this town would welcome him. Maribel froze. Every emotion she thought she had buried rushed to the surface. Confusion, anger, heartbreak, nostalgia, and a tenderness she didn't want to admit still existed. They hadn't stood face to face in years. Years that changed both of them in different ways. Years that left wounds unspoken. He spotted her through the cafe window. Their eyes locked. A second stretched into a lifetime. He hesitated before walking toward the entrance, his steps slow, uncertain, almost timid. By the time he reached the door, Maribel was already standing. When he stepped inside, the bell chimed softly, a sound that felt entirely too gentle for the moment unfolding. For a moment, neither of them spoke. His voice broke the silence, not strong, not firm, but quiet, raw, almost unfamiliar. Maribel. Her name left his lips like an apology. She swallowed hard. Cassian, why are you here? He looked down, gathering himself. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. I saw the post. The room seemed to shrink around them. I didn't know, he continued, his words knotting together. I didn't know she felt that deeply, that she carried that kind of pain. Maribel's eyes narrowed, not with cruelty, but with a truth that had lived in her for years. How could you not know? He flinched slightly, not physically, but something in his expression collapsed. I told myself she was better off without my chaos. I told myself staying away meant keeping you both free from the pressure I was under. I thought, he exhaled shakily, I thought I was protecting you. Maribel shook her head slowly. She didn't need protection from you. She needed presence. She needed a father. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if her words hit a place he hadn't allowed himself to feel. When he looked at her again, regret washed over him like a tide. I know I failed her, he said softly, and I failed you too. Maribel looked away, blinking back the heat building behind her eyes. She wasn't expecting him to admit that. She wasn't expecting him to show up at all. Why now, Cassian? She whispered. Why come back after all this time? Because she told the world what I should have heard years ago. His voice cracked. Because when I saw her face in that photo, everything I missed came crashing back at once, and I realized that nothing I've built means anything if she can't look at me without pain. He stepped closer, though still keeping a respectful distance. Maribel stiffened, not because she didn't understand the sincerity in his voice, not because she didn't believe he meant it, but because she knew Celeste wasn't prepared for another wound, not after letting the world see her deepest hurt. She's at school, Maribel said, but she's overwhelmed. Everyone has seen the post now. People are talking. Teachers are pulling her aside. She's trying to stay calm, but she's barely holding it together. Cassian's hands tightened into fists, not in anger at her, but at himself. I didn't think it would spread so fast, he murmured. Neither did she, Maribel replied. A heavy silence settled between them. For years, she had imagined what she'd say if he ever walked back into her life. She imagined anger. She imagined long speeches about responsibility and pain. She imagined telling him how hard it was to raise a child with a quiet ache living inside her. But now, standing here, no speech felt right. Because despite everything, she could see the truth on his face. He wasn't here to defend himself. He wasn't here to excuse the past. He was here because something inside him had broken open. Maribel folded her arms, trying to steady her breath. Cassian, if you want to see her, you need to be ready for the truth. All of it. She doesn't hate you. That's the painful part. She never hated you. She wanted you. She waited for you. He lowered his head, shame washing over him. And now that she's finally spoken, you can't show up for a moment and disappear again. If you do that, if you walk into her life and walk out again, you'll damage her in ways that won't be repairable. He met her gaze, eyes glassy, voice barely above a whisper. I won't disappear. She studied him carefully. He wasn't the same man she knew years ago. The confidence she once admired had softened into humility. The ambition that once consumed him seemed tempered by something deeper. "Let me talk to her first," Maribel said quietly. "She needs to know you're here." Cassian's voice shook as he responded, "I'll wait, as long as it takes." Outside, the sky began to shift colors, morning deepening into midday, and the weight of the years between them settled like a quiet truth. For the first time in a long time, Maribel saw a possibility, small, uncertain, but real. This story wasn't finished. Not yet. Why? Not trying to fill the silence with words, but wanting to listen. "Tell me what I missed, if you want to." The invitation was humble. It was also risky. He was asking to be allowed into pieces of her life he had never seen. Celeste hesitated. There was a lifetime to summarize, but she started small. "You missed birthdays," she said. "Performances, my art shows, the choir concert, getting into advanced classes, the little things you'd expect a father to notice." She watched him absorb each moment like notes in a song he had never learned. "I took pictures," she continued. "I wrote. I tried to understand how to love someone who wasn't there." Cassian listened as if every detail mattered. He frowned at times, not in confusion so much as in the sharp recognition of what his absence had cost. The air between them softened as she spoke, not because it erased the past, but because truth began to make room for something else. Presence. Maribel sat quietly on the sofa nearby, watching them. She wanted to protect her daughter, but she also wanted her to decide how this should move forward. She had seen both the warmth and the cracks in Cassian's heart. Both had a claim on her empathy. After Celeste spoke, Cassian didn't reach out immediately. When he finally did, it was cautious. One hand extended slowly toward her, palm up, a gesture asking permission rather than assuming closeness. Celeste looked at his hand, then up at his face. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she did not step back. Instead, she placed her hand lightly on his, not a full embrace, not complete trust, but a beginning. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I don't know what comes next. I'm not ready to forgive everything. I'm not ready to pretend none of this hurt matters. But I also don't want to close off what could be possible if you're willing to prove you'll stay." Cassian's eyes filled. The gratitude in his expression was near holy, like a man who had been given a second chance that he knew he didn't deserve yet hoped to earn. "I will stay," he promised. "I'll do the hard work. I won't ask for forgiveness as if it's owed. I'll show up." They sat together for a long time after that, talking about small things first, the weather, school, favorite books, careful, rebuilding conversation from its simplest parts. Laughter came in small, surprised bursts, and grief surfaced again like waves that needed to be acknowledged. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was honest, slow, and a little messy, the kind of real-life repair that doesn't happen in perfect scenes but in patient hours. When evening settled, Celeste stood and hugged her mother. Then, in a quiet moment that felt like a small step toward mending, she turned to Cassian and allowed him another brief hug, closer this time, more intentional. "You have to be ready," she murmured into his shoulder. "Not for appearances. For me." He nodded, breathing in her scent, memorizing the moment like a promise he would carry. Outside, the town moved on. Shops closing, lights switching on. But inside the house, something that had been broken for years had finally been named. It didn't mean it was fixed. It didn't mean there weren't hard days ahead, but it meant there was now a space where healing could begin. And in a world that had watched their private pain become public, a hesitant, careful reunion had started, one that would take time, effort, and the courage to keep showing up day after day. Healing didn't arrive with fireworks or grand declarations. It didn't come with dramatic speeches or sudden transformation. It arrived in small, almost imperceptible steps, steps that required patience, humility, and the willingness to rebuild trust without rushing it. He didn't book a hotel in the next town over, or insist on being chauffeured around. Instead, he rented a modest place just a few streets away, close enough to walk to Celeste's house, but far enough to respect her space. A clean slate, a quiet foundation, a chance to start again without pretense. The first morning in his new rental, he stood in the kitchen staring at a simple ceramic mug as if it were an unfamiliar object. He was used to stainless steel appliances, minimalist interiors, and assistants preparing everything he needed before he even asked. This house was different. Soft, old-fashioned, lived in. When he poured himself a cup of coffee and stood by the small window overlooking the neighborhood, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, and with that stillness came a determination he hadn't known he was capable of. He would show up, not once, not twice, consistently, not with gifts, not with exaggerated gestures meant to erase guilt. All of that felt cheap compared to what Celeste truly needed. She needed presence. She needed time. She needed proof that he wasn't here out of shame or sudden panic, but because he finally understood what mattered. So he started small. Maribel had warned him, "Don't overwhelm her. Let her guide the pace." So instead of knocking loudly or calling ahead, he waited outside their house at the time Maribel said Celeste usually left for school. He stood on the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets, not wanting to intrude. When Celeste stepped out, she stopped short at the sight of him. Her eyebrows lifted, her expression guarded yet curious. You're early," she said. "I wanted to walk with you," he replied gently, "if that's okay." She hesitated, then nodded. A tiny nod, but enough. Their steps fell into an awkward rhythm at first. Quiet, careful, both unsure of how much to say. "You don't have to do this every day," Celeste murmured. After a pause, she spoke again. "It's a long walk. I could use the exercise," he joked lightly. She cracked a small smile. Very small, but it was the first one he'd ever earned directly. Day 3. Learning who she is. Cassian visited in the afternoons, sitting on the porch like a guest, waiting for permission to enter a world he'd neglected. Celeste would join him, sometimes with homework, sometimes with her camera, sometimes with nothing but questions. Day 5. Choir night. Celeste had a small choir performance, nothing large, just a community event held in the school gym. She tried to pretend it didn't matter, brushing it off when Maribel asked if she wanted support. "It's just a few songs," she said. "It's not like a big show." But the truth was, it did matter. Even small achievements mattered when you grew up wanting someone to applaud. She didn't expect Cassian to come. She didn't even mention it. But he found out accidentally. Maribel had left a flyer on the counter when he came over. That evening, Celeste stood on the risers with the other singers, fidgeting with her sleeves, scanning the crowd more out of habit than hope. And there he was, sitting beside Maribel, hands folded neatly, chin lifted slightly, eyes focused entirely on her. When their gazes met, he gave her the smallest nod, simple, supportive, unforced. Celeste felt a warmth spread through her chest, so quickly she had to look away before tears formed. After the performance, he said nothing dramatic. Just, "You sounded beautiful." It was enough. Day 10. Finding routine. Days blended into a rhythm, gentle and steady. Cassian helped review her college application drafts. He listened when she talked about her photography projects. He asked what books she liked, and then he read them so he could understand her better. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. They just sat outside together, sharing silence that didn't feel uncomfortable. Maribel watched this unfold with mixed emotions. She was relieved, truly relieved, that Celeste finally had this chance to know her father. But seeing Cassian again stirred old feelings, old memories, old pieces of love she thought she had wrapped away neatly. More present than he had ever been years ago. He no longer carried the restless ambition that once consumed him. Instead, he carried something else: humility, softness, a quiet determination to repair what he'd broken. Maribel didn't know what to think of that. Not yet. A quiet evening on the porch. One evening, after Celeste went to bed, he lingered. The porch light warmed the space, and the sound of crickets filled the still air. Maribel nodded, gazing out at the yard. She made it easy. "No," Maribel said, "not cruelly, just honestly." Cassian pressed his lips together, accepting the truth. "I wish I could go back." Her words weren't an invitation, more like a reminder. But they landed in his heart like hope. They talked for a while about practical things: school schedules, college deadlines, Celeste's future. Then they fell into silence, not tense, not awkward, just thoughtful. He looked at her with a seriousness she hadn't seen in years. "I had to," he replied. "The life I built, it cost more than I realized." He shook his head slowly. "I regret the parts I lost along the way." Their eyes met, soft, searching, careful. She didn't pull away. She didn't lean in either. It wasn't time for any of that. But something unspoken had shifted between them. Something warm, something old, something that never fully died. Celeste's growing trust. Celeste began opening up more each day, revealing pieces of her heart she had kept guarded for years. She showed him her photography journal, pages filled with snapshots of everyday moments, captured with angles that revealed tenderness in the mundane. "This is beautiful," he whispered, flipping through the pages. "They're just pictures," she mumbled. "No," he corrected gently, "they're moments. And you see them in a way most people don't." Her cheeks flushed with quiet pride. They visited a local cafe one afternoon, sitting near the window while she explained her plans for college. Cassian listened attentively, nodding, asking thoughtful questions, not dominating the discussion, not redirecting it toward his world, just being present. "You think I could get in?" she asked nervously. "I think any school would be lucky to have you," he said. She blinked rapidly, clearly trying not to smile too widely. Trust didn't return all at once. It seeped in slowly, like sunlight through curtains, soft at first, then warm, then steady. Celeste didn't forgive everything, and he didn't ask her to. She hadn't forgotten the years he missed, but she began to understand the man he was now. And that mattered, a new beginning. One night, as Cassian walked her home from the cafe, Celeste spoke softly. "You came back." He looked over at her, voice quiet. "I should have sooner, but you're here now." "Yes," he said. "And I'm not leaving." Celeste nodded, a gentle acceptance forming in her expression. She wasn't offering unconditional forgiveness. She was offering something far more meaningful, a chance. And sometimes, a chance is the doorway to everything that comes next. Rebuilding trust between a father and daughter required patience. Rebuilding something between two adults, two people with a shared past, shared mistakes and shared memories, required something even slower. Maribel didn't expect anything to happen between her and Cassian again. Not truly. She was focused on Celeste, on protecting her, on supporting her as she adjusted to the sudden changes in their lives. Romance wasn't part of her plans. It wasn't even on the horizon. And yet, small things began to stir between herself and Cassian in ways neither of them intentionally sought out. It started with simple proximity. Cassian stopped by regularly to see Celeste, and naturally, he interacted with Maribel along the way. The conversations were practical at first. School schedules, chores, updates on Celeste's mood, but slowly they deepened into something more honest. Not flirty, not nostalgic, just two adults rediscovering each other's humanity. The return of familiar comfort. One afternoon, Maribel found him on the porch repairing a loose hinge on the screen door. He hadn't asked for attention. He hadn't announced what he was doing. He just noticed it squeaked and quietly decided to fix it. "You didn't have to do that," she said, leaning against the doorframe. He glanced up briefly. "I wanted to—" She watched him for a moment. The man tightening those screws was not the same one she had left years ago. Back then, Cassian couldn't slow down long enough to fix something as simple as a door. His mind always lived in tomorrow. It stirred something in her, not romance, not longing, just a soft warmth, a reminder of the man he could have been if life had allowed him to breathe sooner. There, doesn't squeak anymore. She tested it. The door swung smoothly. "Thank you," she murmured. He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, and for a moment she saw the younger Cassian, the one who once brought her hot cocoa at midnight, because she mentioned craving it, the one who stayed up reading her stories, even though technology manuals were more his style. But she didn't say anything. Some memories were easier to feel than to speak aloud. Shared evenings. Over the next several weeks, Cassian often stayed a little later, after spending time with Celeste. Maribel didn't ask him to. He simply didn't rush off the way he used to. Sometimes he lingered on the porch while she watered her plants. Sometimes he sat at the kitchen table while she washed dishes, offering to dry them. Sometimes they ended up talking long after Celeste went to bed. There was no pressure, no expectations. One evening, they sat outside, the breeze warm and the sky fading from soft gold to deep blue. Fireflies flickered in the yard, tiny sparks dancing through the fading light. Celeste had gone upstairs with a stack of textbooks, leaving the two of them alone. Cassian rested his elbows on his knees. "Do you ever think about those days in the city?" Maribel let out a small breath. "Sometimes. Good memories?" he asked carefully. "Some," she replied. "But they're complicated." He nodded slowly. "I know. I made them complicated." She didn't correct him. She didn't comfort him either. She simply let the truth sit between them. Then he said something she didn't expect. "You brought calm into my life when everything felt like noise." They sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with quiet understanding. Not longing, not regret. Just two people acknowledging the past without drowning in it. Old wounds, respectfully touched. Healing didn't mean pretending the past was clean. Sometimes hard truths surfaced carefully, respectfully. One evening, Maribel asked him, "Did you ever wonder about her?" "Really wonder?" Cassian didn't deflect. He didn't offer excuses. "Then why didn't you come?" "Because I didn't trust myself," he replied. "I didn't trust that I could give her the life she deserved. And sometimes I thought you were better off without the chaos I carried." Maribel studied him for a long moment, recognizing the sincerity. "You could have told me that. I didn't know how," he whispered. "I was too wrapped up in my own fear." She didn't argue. She didn't scold him. She understood something clearly now. The younger Cassian had been brilliant, ambitious, hard-working, but emotionally unprepared. Not cruel, not careless, just overwhelmed. And people who are overwhelmed often run without meaning to. Slow warmth. One night, after Cassian helped Celeste organize her college essays, he lingered by the door before leaving. "Do you need anything before I go?" he asked. "No," Maribel said softly. "We're all right." He nodded, but didn't move. "Thank you for letting me be here," he said. She offered a small smile. "You're doing the work, Cassian. You're showing up. That's what matters. I'm grateful you trust me enough to try again," he murmured. Maribel felt something shift inside her, not romantically, but gently. The man standing before her wasn't the one she had walked away from. He was older now, wiser, unafraid to admit mistakes, unafraid to learn. "Just keep showing up," she said. Their hands brushed accidentally as he reached for his keys. Neither pulled away immediately. It wasn't a spark. It was a reminder that they once fit together, a reminder that the past wasn't entirely lost, a reminder that connection doesn't disappear. It only quiets, waiting for the right moment to speak again. They didn't label it. They simply allowed the moment to exist. A walk by the river. Weeks later, the three of them went for a walk after dinner, Celeste leading the way, Cassian and Maribel following behind. Eventually, Celeste wandered ahead to take pictures of the water, leaving the two adults trailing side by side. The river shimmered softly in the late evening light. The sound of water was soothing, tugging on memories neither had touched in years. "This reminds me of the bridge near your old apartment," Cassian said quietly. Maribel smiled faintly. "You used to love that view. I loved the peace of being there with you," he corrected. "I didn't get a lot of peace back then." She looked at him carefully. "Do you now?" He inhaled deeply, then nodded. "More than I deserve." "People deserve peace," she said simply. He turned to her, and for a moment, everything else faded. The noise of the river, the distant call of a bird, even the weight of the past. They stood there, not as ex-lovers, not as former partners, but as two people finding their way back to a place of understanding. Then he spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "I never stopped caring about you." Maribel felt her throat tighten. "And I never stopped wishing you would grow into the man I knew you could be." He stepped closer, not intruding, not assuming, just offering presence. "I want to rebuild this," he said. "Not from the past, from who we are now." She searched his eyes, seeing the honesty, the effort, the change. Then, with a breath that felt like a release, she whispered, "Then we take it slow." Their hands met, not clasping, not gripping, just touching, a tender promise, not a reunion, not a rush into old love, just a quiet beginning, a beginning shaped by patience, a beginning shaped by forgiveness, a beginning chosen with care. Cassian had hoped the small town would offer a quiet corner where he could focus on Celeste and build something steady without distraction. But life had taught him many lessons recently, and one of them was this: nothing stays hidden when the world is already watching. At first, his presence slipped under the radar. A few locals noticed him walking with Celeste or chatting with Maribel on the porch, but small towns respect privacy, at least until curiosity starts whispering. And in this case, curiosity had plenty of material to feed on. A well-known CEO suddenly living in a rental house near Main Street. A man who rarely stepped into public without a suit, now dressed in simple clothes, carrying grocery bags like any other neighbor. Politely. But they talked. It might have stayed local, if not for a single photo taken by a passerby. A blurry but recognizable shot of Cassian and Celeste sitting outside the bakery, sharing muffins and laughing at something she said. The photographer didn't mean harm. They simply posted it with the caption, "Is this who I think it is?" Within hours, someone confirmed it. Within a day, the post made its way to a news outlet. Within 2 days, journalists were driving down the very road where Maribel once felt safe enough to raise her daughter in peace. Maribel saw the first article appear on her screen as she prepared dinner. She froze, wooden spoon in hand, staring at the headline. Cassian Rowe seen in quiet town after daughter's viral post. Her stomach dropped. She had dreaded this moment. She had hoped, naively, that the internet would lose interest. But the world rarely loses interest in a story that calls out wealth, emotion, and accountability all at once. She stepped onto the porch to call Cassian. He arrived 10 minutes later, walking briskly from his rental house. He looked calm on the outside, but she could see tension in the way he held his jaw. "They found you," Maribel said softly. "I know," he replied. "I saw the posts. What are you going to do?" He looked past her shoulder towards Celeste's room, where warm light spilled through the curtains. "I'm not running," he said quietly. "I won't disappear again." Maribel nodded, relieved but worried. "They'll ask questions." She studied him carefully, sensing a steadiness in him that hadn't existed when they were young. He was no longer the man who avoided discomfort. He was a man choosing to face it head-on for the sake of the people he had once failed. The interview on the porch. It happened the next morning. A journalist from a well-respected magazine arrived in town, not with a swarm of cameras or intrusive microphones, but with a single notebook and a gentle request. "I want to tell the truth. Not gossip, not speculation. The truth." Cassian surprised Maribel by agreeing. He didn't invite the journalist into a fancy office. He didn't rehearse answers. He didn't prepare statements approved by a team of advisors. Instead, he invited them to sit on the porch, the same porch where Celeste had taken the photo that changed everything. He sat across from the journalist while Maribel remained inside, watching through the window, unsure if the world was ready for what he was about to reveal. "Why are you here? When did you see the post? What did it make you feel?" Cassian didn't dodge a single one. "I'm here because I should have been in her life all along," he answered. "I saw the post the morning it went viral, and it broke me." The journalist raised an eyebrow. "Broke you how?" Cassian inhaled slowly. gaze drifting toward the yard before returning to the interviewer. I've stood on stages in front of thousands of people. I've signed deals worth more than most people could imagine. But nothing felt as heavy as seeing my daughter cry over years I should have shown up for. He didn't speak about investors. He didn't blame his workload. He didn't excuse his absence. Instead, he spoke of fear he had hidden for too long. I didn't stay away because I didn't care. I stayed away because I felt unprepared. I thought I'd fail her. I thought I'd make her life harder. But the truth is, I made it harder by not being there at all. The journalist scribbled quickly, stealing glances at him with visible surprise. Cassian continued. Her mother did everything. She carried the weight I should have helped carry, and I can't take back what I missed, but I can do better now. When the interview ended, the journalists shut their notebook gently. People will talk about this, they said. Cassian nodded. Let them. This is the first time in my life I'm not trying to control the story. The world responds again. The interview went live 2 days later. It spread faster than Celeste's original post, not because people wanted scandal, but because they recognized sincerity. Comments flooded the article. I didn't expect this kind of honesty. This is how you own your failures. Respect to him for facing it. I hope they heal as a family. Some still criticized him. That was inevitable. But for many, seeing a powerful man admit fault with humility was a shock, one that softened harsh opinions. Celeste read the article sitting at the kitchen table, knees pulled up, fingers tapping nervously against her mug. Maribel sat across from her, watching her face carefully. When she finished, she looked up with watery eyes. Celeste bit her lip. Do you think he means it? Celeste closed her eyes, letting the weight of that truth wash over her. She wasn't ready to call everything fixed, but she wasn't afraid anymore either. Something inside her opened, a space where forgiveness could grow, slowly, without being forced. A moment together. That evening, the three of them sat on the porch as the sun dipped low. It wasn't a celebration. It wasn't a major milestone. It was simply a moment where peace settled over the space between them. People are reacting to the interview, Cassian said softly. A lot of them. What did you think? He asked gently. She looked at him. Not the public figure. Not the man from headlines, but the father who had shown up almost every day since the post. I think, she said slowly, that you're trying. And that matters more than everything else. Cassian's eyes softened. Maribel smiled quietly, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. The world had opinions. The world had commentary. But on that porch, under the soft glow of evening, none of that mattered. What mattered was this. A father was no longer running. A daughter was no longer waiting alone. And a woman who once raised her child with quiet strength was finally seeing the beginning of something she had always hoped for. A family finding its way back to each other. As the dust settled and the noise of the internet gradually quieted, Maribel found herself reflecting on everything their family had endured. Past choices, present healing, and unexpected second chances. She often sat on the porch in the evenings, letting the cool air brush across her skin as she replayed the journey in her mind. This wasn't a story of perfection. It wasn't a story of flawless characters who made every right move. It was a story of growth, wounds, courage, and the kind of love that requires effort rather than ease. One evening, after a peaceful dinner, Maribel rested on the porch swing while Celeste cleaned up inside. The soft creak of the swing matched the rhythm of her thoughts. When Cassian stepped outside, he found her deep in contemplation. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. "Everything," she replied with a faint smile. "What happened? What changed? What we all learned." He sat beside her, their silence comfortable. After a moment she began to speak, not just to him, but to herself, to her daughter, and to anyone who might one day need these reminders. 1. Presence matters more than wealth. Maribel looked down at her hands, remembering years of birthdays spent with a single empty chair. She wasn't bitter. She had learned long ago that bitterness corrodes the person holding it. But she also understood something deeply. "Children don't measure love by money," she said softly. "They measure it by who shows up, by who listens, by who stays." Cassian lowered his head, absorbing her words without defensiveness. She wanted time, a hand to hold, a voice that said, "I'm here." He nodded slowly. "I understand that now. Presence leaves a warmth that money can't replicate. Absence leaves a shadow that money can't erase. 2. Healing takes time, but IT begins with honesty." Maribel leaned back against the swing, her gaze drifting to the window where Celeste still moved around in the kitchen. "She didn't need you to be perfect," she said. "She needed the truth. That's why her post hurt so much. It carried honesty she'd been hiding." Cassian thought of his interview, of the rawness he allowed the world to see. Telling the truth was harder than any business decision I've ever made. "That's how healing often starts," Maribel replied, "with honesty that shakes us before it steadies us. Healing isn't a straight path." 3. Love requires effort. Love in movies is often portrayed as effortless. Two people falling into each other's arms with no real work involved. Real love, Maribel knew, looked nothing like that. "It's not enough to feel love," she said quietly. "You have to act on it. You have to nurture it. You have to show up for it." Cassian listened, humbled. "I used to think love meant wanting the best for someone. But wanting isn't enough. Effort is the part I never learned." "You're learning now," she replied gently. "And that's what matters. Love doesn't thrive in silence. It grows through consistent action, through patience, through attention. It asks for commitment, not perfection. Regret doesn't define you. Your actions do." Cassian's voice came out low. "There are days I can barely look at myself. I wasted so many moments. You can't rewrite the past," Maribel said, "but you can choose what you do moving forward. Regret may remind you of where you faltered, but it doesn't have to trap you there. Regret can either chain someone to their mistakes or push them toward better choices." Cassian had finally chosen the latter. "The man you're becoming," she added, "is someone your daughter can rely on. That's what counts now." 5. Family isn't about perfection. IT's about choosing each other. The porch grew quiet. A warm breeze passed through the yard, carrying the faint scent of summer. Maribel watched the light from the kitchen spill onto the grass, illuminating scenes that felt simple but precious. Celeste humming to herself, dishes clinking softly, the peaceful comfort of a home finally finding balance. "Family isn't built on perfect people," Maribel said at last. "It's built on people who choose each other, even after mistakes, even after hurt." Cassian looked toward the doorway, where Celeste now stood, wiping her hands on a towel before leaning against the frame. "It took us a long time to get here," Celeste said, stepping outside. "It did," Maribel admitted. "But we made it." Cassian's eyes shone with quiet gratitude. "Thank you both. for letting me be part of this again." Celeste smiled gently. "You're choosing us now, and we're choosing you too. Not because everything is perfect, but because we want to grow together. Family isn't about never breaking. It's about learning to mend. It's about vulnerability. It's about forgiveness. Not the easy kind, but the kind built through genuine change. It's about choosing each other, again and again." As the evening settled around them, the three of them sat together. No expectations, no forced smiles, just a shared understanding that life had given them a second chance. A chance they intended to honor. A chance shaped by truth, effort, and love with real roots. And quietly, Maribel whispered the lesson she hoped Celeste would carry for the rest of her life. What matters isn't where you begin, or even where you stumble. What matters is how you rise and who you rise with. A full year passed after the post that shook the internet. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost unreal at first. Steady, warm, and gentle in ways none of them expected. The chaos of the viral moment faded, replaced with new beginnings and small victories that stitched meaning back into their days. For Celeste, the year became a journey of discovery, not just of who her father was becoming, but of who she was growing into. Her photography blossomed. Her confidence grew. Her world felt bigger, not because of fame or attention, but because she finally had a father who showed up for real, in the ways that mattered most. And now, standing in the buzzing auditorium on the day of her high school graduation, both of her parents at her side, she understood something she had once thought impossible. She wasn't walking alone anymore. The graduation day. The gym overflowed with families, cheering parents, proud siblings, and the occasional grandparent wiping tears with tissues balled tightly in their hands. Colorful banners hung from the rafters, and the stage glowed under soft lighting. The air brimmed with excitement. Maribel stood adjusting Celeste's graduation cap, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. "You're ready," she whispered. Celeste smiled. "Only because of you." Cassian stepped forward, straightening the sash on her robe. His hands moved with care, almost trembling. "You've earned every moment of this," he said quietly. "I'm honored to be here." A year ago, those words would have sounded like a dream Celeste didn't dare imagine. Today, they were real, steady and full of meaning. When her name was called, the room filled with applause. Maribel clapped until her palms stung. Cassian stood taller than he ever had in his life, eyes glistening, overcome by the moment. Celeste walked across the stage with quiet pride, not to prove anything, not to impress anyone, but because she had reached a milestone with both of her parents finally in the audience, together. She shook the principal's hand, accepted her diploma, and turned toward the crowd. She spotted her mother first, beaming, glowing with joy. Then Cassian, eyes wet, smiling with genuine awe. For the first time, Celeste felt whole, a family embrace. After the ceremony, the crowd poured outside. Friends hugged, families took photos. Laughter drifted through the warm air. Celeste walked toward her parents, diploma in hand. Maribel met her first, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I'm so proud of you," Maribel whispered. Celeste leaned into her mother's shoulder, letting the warmth wash over her. Then she turned to her father. Cassian didn't rush. He didn't assume. He simply opened his arms gently, giving her space to choose. She stepped into the hug without hesitation. His breath caught as he held his daughter close, a moment he had once thrown away but now treasured more than anything. The top of her cap brushed his chin, and he closed his eyes, feeling the weight of years he wished he could reclaim. A quiet celebration. That evening the three of them gathered for a small celebration at home. Celeste chose her favorite meal. Maribel baked her favorite cake. They laughed over photos, shared stories from childhood, and passed around framed pictures from her early years. Cassian listened to every detail, with awe, absorbing fragments of the life he once missed. The first, lost tooth. The school project that won first place. The time she helped a stray cat. Stories he had never heard. Stories he'd cherished now. At one point, when Celeste left the room to change out of her gown, Cassian turned to Maribel. "You gave her everything," he said quietly. "Everything I failed to give." Maribel shook her head gently. "We both gave what we could. Now you're giving more." He looked at her with a tenderness she hadn't seen since they were young. But this time, the tenderness was steadier, grounded, grown from experience rather than youthful passion. "You've changed," she said softly. "In ways I didn't expect. I had to," he replied. "Losing you and almost losing her. It forced me to see what mattered." She studied him for a moment, not as the man she once loved, not as the father who had left, but as the man who chose to come back. He looked at her with a warmth that spoke volumes. "I didn't find it alone." A moment on the porch. Later that night, after the celebration ended, Celeste went upstairs to rest. The house quieted. The porch light glowed softly, casting a gentle halo around Maribel and Cassian as they stepped outside. The air held a calm that only comes after long storms, peace earned, not given. Cassian leaned against the railing, hands in his pockets. "When I look back," he said slowly, "I realize how much time I wasted trying to build a life that meant nothing without the people I loved." Maribel's voice was quiet. "You've made up for a lot of that time. Not with grand gestures, but with consistency. That's what builds trust." He nodded. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I never lose this again." She stepped closer, folding her arms gently. "We're not going backward. We're moving forward, one day at a time." He turned his head toward her, eyes reflecting the warm porch light. "I don't want to rush anything. I just don't want to lose this chance with you either." Maribel inhaled deeply, feeling the weight and the promise of his words. "You won't," she said softly. "We'll figure it out slowly." Their hands brushed lightly, fingers tangling for a moment before intertwining, a gesture not of longing, but of understanding. A gesture two adults make when they've walked through difficult years and finally arrive on the other side with perspective. A gesture that whispered, "This time, we choose each other with intention. The final moment." The stars began to sprinkle across the sky, and the quiet hum of the neighborhood settled around them. Cassian turned to her, voice soft with gratitude. Maribel looked at him, truly looked at him, and with calm certainty she squeezed his hand gently.